Well, g'day and welcome back to Reality Check. And today we've got a very interesting story from three people who were around the Congress on the evening prior to the UAP hearing. And it's a very interesting story, and I'll just introduce each person first and then we'll get into the yarn. Sarah Gamm is an old Reality Check veteran. Welcome back, Sarah. She works with the US Army Corps of Engineers in Virginia, but she's previously worked as an expert geointelligence analyst for both private defence contractors and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. She's an expert in anomaly detection, characterisation and resolution. She has also previously supported the UAP task force while working at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. She's talking to us today in her private capacity about what she witnessed with multiple people the evening before the UAP hearing on Tuesday, the 9th of September, before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee's task force on the declassification of federal secrets. They really are going to have to reduce that name title. Dr. Anna Brady Esteves is a newbie to Reality Check, but Anna, you are very welcome. She's a scientist and founding partner of American Deep Tech, a deep technology investment firm. She's also an advisory board member for the UAP Disclosure Foundation and a former program director at the US government's National Science Foundation, leading its commercial portfolios in areas such as space technologies, energy and digital assets. While in government, Anna co-chaired, alongside NASA, the US Space Economy Interagency Working Group, a government group that also publicly shared information on UAP alongside other leading-edge technologies. She's also co-chaired, alongside the White House Office of Science Technology Policy, the United States Digital Assets R&D agenda, and has led deep tech and AI portfolios that have gone on to achieve more than $18 billion in total company valuation. And she's spoken frequently on the innovation and economic growth aspects of UAP. Earlier this year, she briefed Congress and shared her experiences speaking as a member of the UAP experts panel, talking about how intriguingly UAP tech is here and the race is on. She's got a PhD in chemical and environmental engineering from Yale University and a Bachelor of Science in chemical engineering from the Johns Hopkins University. A total overachiever by the looks of it. On the evening
Those are kind words. I'm just happy to be here with you, Ross.
So on the evening of Tuesday, the 9th of October, these two very impressive women joined UAP experiencer and Reality Check veteran Chris Bledsoe. Welcome back, Chris, for what turned out to be an extraordinary evening of sightings over the White House and the Congress. And Anna, because you're the newbie, I'm going to kick you off and say, what did you see, please?
So we saw what appeared to be orbs. So basically, and I've got to admit that there was so much light initially because we were standing directly opposite the Capitol that I didn't see that. I'm the voice saying, where is it? Where is it? For the first one. And then I saw some of the later ones, which appeared to be lights, moving around erratically, orbs, and, exhibiting interesting characteristics. But I guess I would just say that really one of the things that brought me to Chris is that he's, I would say, the leading observational scientist who sees more of this than anyone else. So I know that I've seen quite a bit of this with Chris. I've also seen it independently. So I'd say that this light phenomena can represent a wide range of things. There are times that it appears that there are craft, in such lights and orbs, and there are other times that they, appear to be more just balls of light. And I would say I've seen those both close in and far away. So it was, I think it was interesting to see that over the Capitol, the People's House, right before the UAP hearings.
Can I ask you this, Anna? And I know that you will be a scientist and rigorous in your response and your objectivity. Do you think it was a total coincidence that this was the night before the UAP hearing?
Well, the other thing, but beyond being a scientist, is I'm somebody who absolutely loves to walk the National Mall. So I've lived in the Washington area since 2009. So I really enjoy walking the mall at night. And no, I don't think it's a coincidence.
So let's talk in detail then. I think we'll come to you, Sarah. As I understand it, was there some kind of attempt to summon or invite the phenomenon to show itself that night? And were you and Chris involved? Because I know that both of you in the past have talked to me about psionics and your capacity, if you like, to telepathically or psychically engage with the phenomenon. Something, of course, which a lot of people are very skeptical about. But was there an effort to connect that night?
Absolutely, there was an effort to and here's Krypton. There was absolutely an intent to connect. I mean, there was a few of us left at the pre-hearing gathering, and there was just so much good energy there. And a few of us didn't, we weren't quite ready to go home yet. So, we set the intent to walk a few blocks and try to see what we could. We knew there was, light pollution, and we're in the middle of DC, but why not try since we're all together? And Chris offered so kindly to, lead the charge and start asking and started his prayer, or I don't know what proper word to call it. If he calls it a prayer or the initial intent to see them and kind of make contact type thing.
Now, Chris, that's a perfect segue from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, to introduce you again.
Welcome.
Chris, just explain to us, please, how you do what you do. And what were you doing that night to invite the phenomenon?
Well, this thing's been a part of my life for the last half years, and I'm constantly connected to it. It is part of telepathic communication that never leaves. And so we were all together having this reception with a group of amazing individuals in Capitol Hill Club with Eric Burleson and Anna Luna, and I was thrilled to be invited there. And we just walked out afterwards. It was early, 10 o'clock, and Anna's like, "You guys want to go skywatch?" And I said, "Why not?" And so our group went over to the Library of Congress and stood up on the platform, and I just led the group in a little prayer, or it's what it is. It's a prayer to me to so it can hear me, and it does. That's how it hears me, and it responded like right away.
Now, Chris, when you do that, I mean, obviously there are a lot of people out there watching this who will say this is all hokum, and this is a bunch of well-meaning good folk. You're a God-fearing man who see it through a religious prism. But essentially, let me be the deep skeptic for a moment, the honorary debunker. This is a confirmational bias. It was a complete coincidence that there were some objects in the sky, and if you accept the findings of one notorious debunker, these were just birds circling in the sky that were reflected by the lights from the city. What do you say to that dismissive notion?
Well, for every one of those, there are 10,000 that sees it as real. Around me, I have very few people that I don't even pay attention. I just think they're uninformed, and one day they'll see the truth. We had so many people from the government there. If you don't want to hear these experts say they saw what they saw, then they'll never believe. So I don't waste my time.
And I do sympathize, Ross, in that, as a scientist, I mean, I think that had I not seen this that night and had a broader body of experience and really been listening to what people, both in the government and the private sector, have disclosed, I would be asking the same questions. I think in some cases it comes from a curiosity and an eagerness actually to know what's out there. And sometimes a disappointment, in terms of not having the experience with, certain types of experiences or body of evidence. But I guess we are at a stage right now, where we've had Congress talk about this, the president talk about this, members of the government, members of the military, but think about the people at home. Have you seen something? Have your family members seen something? And so at this point, I think it's less about, I'm certainly not here to convince people. It's more to share information about something historic that has happened here at a critical time, but is also happening all over the country to people. So it's really more of an invitation and a validation for people that are seeing unusual and anomalous things. I might feel like it's time to dig further. And with all respect that it maybe isn't time for everybody to engage with this, and it can be disruptive to some people's worldview. So I totally respect that.
I can tell you, Anna, I know we've got to respect the identities of some of the people that were there that evening, but it would be helpful for our audience to get an idea of just who was there that evening, whom we can identify. And as I understand it, it was quite a high-powered group of people many of whom have worked in government and defense and intelligence.
And thank you for saying that. And I'm happy to go into a bit about the people who are there, but just also to step back from the hierarchy here. I think we've been thinking so much about what is the president going to say? What is the government going to say? And we're happy to use our body of experience, but so many people around the country, farmers, teachers, police officers, everybody, there's a number of people that are seeing this. So I also don't want to take away from anybody's experience that, isn't a government worker. But that said, one of the people who invited us to share her name is Dr. Donna Roberts. Donna Roberts is really, great person commercially, so commercially forward and innovation forward. She's come on as our chief scientist at American Deep Tech, but most recently she was the deputy chief scientist of the International Space Station. So she was active. So
that's really something. That's something. That's a very, really, that's a high level scientist.
Yeah, she's, and another person there who's welcomed us to use his name is Eric Zydak, who is the deputy chief investment officer for one of the nation's leading pension funds, Pacific Gas and Electric. Somebody who's, been forward on this topic previously. Sid Goldberg of the Gaia Network. So these are some people who were willing to speak to their names, but there were also a number of people from other agencies who they're just still in government and they didn't want to speak for their agencies. But we found that the innovation forward people, the economic growth people, while coming forward in a spirit of humility, are very much, many of them full speed ahead on this. And they started out with an openness. They held interagency discussions with the private sector on this last year and this year. And, these are people that it's not their first time seeing it either, for the most part. I think for everybody had seen this before.
Now, Sarah, you're the geospatial intelligence expert. You've worked with imagery. You know how to analyze photographs and videos. Tell me, please, obviously you were there that night, but what did you see and why do you believe that what you saw that night was anomalous? And we'll probably run sections of the video as you're talking over this.
Okay. It's such a good question because at first, my optimistic brain always wants to think something's immediately is anomalous, but the science brain kicks in and goes through the things of, well, I know it's not, parallax because I'm not watching this from a video like I usually have done when I was a part of the task force. And I think of, the 5 maneuverables, and I go through that of, one of them, before I started recording, it's actually what triggered my brain to go look at flight radar and start recording. So, but early on, one of the orbs that I saw made, like a step pattern, almost like you're going downstairs, like that type of step pattern. And it went very fast, suddenly stopped, made 90-degree turn, dropped altitude, and then did that again, did it a couple of times. And at the end of that, I actually saw like a gold orange color that was also produced from it. And so pretty early on, we knew this wasn't, a drone. It wasn't an aircraft. It was, producing light. It wasn't reflecting light. No bird could do that I know of.
That's a crucial point. So it was self-illuminating, which is quite a common feature of these orbs or craft or however you want to term them. Yeah. Just explain what you mean by self-illuminating.
So self-illuminating, like it's not reflecting light. So it's not, or like a bird. So light reflecting off of feathers on a bird. So if something's illuminating in the sky, which sometimes there's, spotlights and stuff that are, or building lights that are illuminating in the sky. So we also didn't see any wings or flight pattern like that from a bird. And I'm not certain what bird could do a vertical figure eight that we had observed for 10 to 15 minutes. It did all the maneuverabilis I could think of, but when I saw that step pattern and then the next orb we saw, or maybe it might have been at the same time, that was when I was like, I need to check flight radar because we were looking in the direction of Reagan Airport. And so just to get my analyst brain going, I needed to check the data. Granted, I know flight radar doesn't always disclose every single thing that's in the air. And then started thinking about a drone. Like we're looking in the direction of the Capitol building, possibly the White House. There's not going to be a drone there. And plus what drone can also maneuver that way. So, the science brain quickly went through a lot of stuff as I was trying to record some of the things while we were all in awe. And I mean, you could hear our excitement in the video. It was very real.
Anna, coming back to you for a moment, obviously you'd know your history. And one of the reasons this evening's events was so significant was it does seem far too much of a coincidence that this happened the evening prior to probably one of the most important UAP hearings in history. There's also events of 1952, July 1952, the two weekends of the so-called Washington flyovers, where anomalous objects were seen over Washington D.C., seen by fighter pilots that were sent to engage them. They were tracked on radar, seen by multiple civilian and military witnesses. It is uncanny, isn't it? Because one, of course, of the most common criticisms that happens is people often say, why don't these things land on the White House lawn? But in 1952, there was a quite extraordinary, still unexplained event that took place over Washington. And I don't want to overstate what you guys saw, but, there's a multiple group of witnesses who clearly feel they saw something highly anomalous.
I think that's right.
What do you want to say, Sarah?
Did I say? Oh, I was just going to say, you've said coincidence a few times now, and there's no such thing as coincidence. There's only synchronicity.
Absolutely. Anna, what's your earliest experience yourself as an experiencer? Obviously you've seen things with Chris, but you alluded earlier to the possibility that you've seen things outside of your time with Chris.
Yes. And so in terms of the one, I'm now seeing that there were some things that were earlier, but the one that I would say is clearest and that was clearest to me, which I've shared previously in public and in the government, I would first say people tried to dissuade me from sharing. So there was very much people telling me, we want you to be an honest broker, and to be an honest broker, people can't know that you've seen things. And I thought that doesn't sound very honest at all.
Who's saying this to you, Anna? Who was making those kind of?
It's interesting. In a lot of cases, these are people they might be pro-disclosure, and they're very open-minded, and it's more that they're concerned that other people are going to write somebody off, for instance, if they say they've seen it, as opposed to being a third party, kind of analyzing people who have seen it. Or I say the third rail of this really is, at a time that faith is unfortunately literally under fire, that this is like the third rail, is if many people who are comfortable with this from the hard tech scientific side, they don't like any mention of the consciousness, the spirituality. So I've got to be frank that I wanted to keep the two things separate myself and say, well, it's kind of, if there's a phenomena, if there's electricity, a lot of things run on electricity. It doesn't have to be the same thing. But I have seen from a scientific standpoint, the pattern of the prayer directly preceding, some of this phenomena, and there are people that have that engagement through other means, basically. But I saw it actually for the first time, something that was very UAP connected, that included orbs that came into close range. So probably it's kind of like a ball of the sun type thing within about 35 or so feet away. And the size was that of a ball. And the reason I'm kind of going in and out on size is that while I didn't have an exact measurement on it, it was in front of a tree trunk. So since the rough sizes of a tree, that kind of gives you a band to work with. And went out to an airstrip that was nearby, and something flashed in, so this anomalous transport of flash in, and upon really zeroing in on a frame there less than probably a 30th or a 60th of a second, there's something that looks craft-like, so who would have thought? You say, is there something unusual there? And then it was unusual looking. So at that time, to be honest, I wasn't sure. I was out of country. I was in Belize. So I was, and I wasn't somebody who was interested in UFOs, UAPs at all. And so I saw that and I thought, well, is this extraterrestrial? Is it advanced military tech? And I was out of the United States. So I thought, well, if it's advanced military tech, whose is it? Right. But so I was not sure at that time, but certainly, as a scientist, as a technologist, in terms of there being much higher performing technologies, craft, phenomena than what is openly acknowledged by everybody, and I think it's great that so many people are having the conversations now. There are things that for those that are looking at high performance, we need to pay attention to them.
One of the things you said at the Congressional UAP Experts panel was that UAP tech is impossible to quantify at this point due to how interwoven it is in quantum and biotech research. But you actually ended by saying it is not credible or viable to act like this isn't going on. And I just want to commend you for your courage, your bravery in speaking out like that. Something's obviously deeply influenced you to feel strongly that you have to take a public stand in speaking about this issue. Can I just come back to that craft for a moment, though? Can you describe in detail why you believe the craft was a technology and not just, for example, another orb or phosphorescence or glowing plasma?
Well, it just looked more like a hard object, and I think part of it was that split second perception, right? So you get that split second perception where sometimes your mind is actually able to assess quite a lot, even faster than, your logic moves. So there was both the perception, but then there was also the ability to see an image that, had something unusual looking there that, it was unusual. It was unusual looking. So it didn't look like I would contrast that with something that looks like the sun that is more like a ball of energy, which Chris has. I'd say Chris has amazing imagery, over time without even having to share a small percentage of it, of exceptional orbs, also harder looking craft, and I think the government has shown some harder looking craft. Obviously, there's radar data on some of this. I mean, in my personal case, I didn't have radar on the vision.
So just coming back to that interesting quote that you gave at the UAP panel, I found it intriguing because what it suggests to me, Anna, is that you don't just believe, you know. Do you know that the phenomenon is real? Do you know that there are technologies engaging with this planet that aren't being disclosed by the US government?
Well, I would also hesitate to say that aren't being disclosed by the U.S. government, because I think some parts of the U.S. government have been doing their part to disclose, and to shine a light on this. So, I mean, I think from what I've heard, there is a serious stewardship, of this, and some people in different parts of the government have different roles and responsibilities. So, some entities are responsible for human health. Others are responsible for regulation of financial markets. Others, it's asymmetric capabilities from a defense standpoint. Others, it's gathering and keeping intelligence. So I would say that there are parts of the government, it's certainly the Congress, but also the innovators in the government who have been trying to share this. And this is well beyond an open secret, I would say. So it's not a secret. It's not an open secret. And this has been going on for a very long time. There's a large number of people who have been exposed to this, both in their government, but also their personal capacities. And then when we started having the conversation with entrepreneurs and scientists more broadly, because we received some very interesting briefings, we found them valuable. Rather than wanting to keep them for ourselves, I asked the question, can this be shared further? So as an example, Dr. Hal Puthoff came in, and we now also work with Hal, but he came in and gave us an amazing briefing, and we said, wow, could this be shared further? Invited entrepreneurs in. And what we found was in the debrief, because we were expecting that this was going to be perceived as unusual, and we found that even without having a very high trust relationship with people, we're finding 30 to 50% of innovators were sharing that they've seen anomalous phenomena. That's not always a craft. It's not always an orb, but they've seen some things that are outside the bounds of explained science. So I said to the United States National Science Foundation, which is very innovation forward, we were able to have conversations where I would say, this is obvious to everybody. I mean, we could never say this isn't a thing, because we would lose credibility with the people we serve, the scientists. So I do think it is detrimental to institutions that try to tell people they haven't seen what they've seen, because, whether it's 1 in 3, 1 in 2, people sitting watching this have either seen it or they haven't, but many of them have.
You've taken a very high-level leadership position at the Science Foundation, the U.S. government Science Foundation. You're basically one of the advisory members. You've worked with NASA. You've worked with the
SBA, a senior investment advisor with the SBA and a national program director.
Obviously, you've worked at a very high level in government in science policy. You've worked on with the Science Foundation. You've worked with the White House Office Science Technology Policy. You've worked with NASA. Where is the obstruction coming? I mean, I talk to a lot of scientists who say that it is nonsensical for us to continue the nonsense of denying the reality of UAP technology and the fact that there is clearly something intelligent that is non-human that is engaging with this planet. Why is it being obstructed inside somewhere in the US government?
Well, there are both things that are real, and there are things that are imagined. So I think some leaders have really shared that they've had a very hard time. We're grateful for their leadership and what some of those people and those whistleblowers have gone through. I would contrast that with on the U.S. Space Economy Interagency. These are people that are leaders in space technology from across the government, and they're trusted and empowered by their organizations. So we brought this forward. We had public days where we would bring forth the most important space technologies. So both, I think, December 18th and January 16th or 17th, these recordings are online. And we brought forth a number of the most important space technologies: launch, satellites, in-space semiconductors, in-space biotechnology, moon infrastructure, asteroid mining. And we dedicated probably about 30% or more of the day to UAP technologies. So I received nothing but great collaboration and support from my colleagues. So way less actual friction, by the way, than something like digital assets. I won't go into that, but you can imagine if that was more of a, let's call it a 50-50. So I was really shocked to not see massive headwinds on the UAP topic amongst the innovators and those responsible for economic growth. Now, we do hear people so on the upside, right, from the economic growth, we say, well, if you can have much higher performing energy technologies, if you can have higher performing spacecraft, there's so many great things that can come from that abundance. There are also people that believe, okay, well, if you can flash in, and if you flash in with a weapon, that's a really bad day, right? That's, people think that could be civilization ending. So I do think that some of the people who are trying to constrain this, it's what they share is it's that basis of concern. And
can I, before I come back to Sarah and Chris, I just want to pin you down on one point. Do you believe that the US government knows that UAP, non-human intelligence technology, has been recovered by the US government and or private aerospace companies?
Well, we've been told that. Yeah, so we've certainly been told that. So yes, I think that's been documented. It's been shared in Congress. It was shared with me. So I'd say it's already been public, and yes. So that's, it's more like who is paying attention and who, for whom is that relevant?
And just acknowledging your leadership on this, have you suffered any stigma, any taboo, any loss of career as a result of your speaking out and taking this leadership role? No,
not at all. I mean, I do think it's something that can be somewhat divisive, so we're never gonna, it's a bit off brand, honestly, from the standpoint that, typically as an investor, you focus on what are the things that have made people a lot of money. So for me, that's energy, it's space tech, it's AI, it's sustainability, it's in biotech. So usually it's really from a business standpoint, you stick to talking about what has performed. But we listen to innovators. So we just feel like we need to listen to people, and humility is warranted in the private sector and certainly in government.
So, Chris, I want to come back to you for a moment. When you made that psychical, telepathic, psionic, whatever you want to call it, connection, is it a religious thing for you? Are you appealing to God, a Christian God, to engage with you? Or what are you doing exactly in your mind when you're seeking to engage and invite the phenomenon to appear?
Well, this is 18 years worth of this, so there's a long history and a lot of people's witnessed it. But to answer that question, my book is called UFO of God for a reason, because I was at rock bottom, ready to do the unthinkable and crying out to God, and it came, and it took my Crohn's disease away, and the rest is history. But I never stop calling on God, and that's all I do. The same thing I did 18 years ago, and I've done it in front of 1,000 people, and it shows up every time. And so
what do you feel like that night when you were connecting with whatever those objects were in the sky? What did you feel?
I felt the same thing I always do. Is I call on the Holy Spirit, and that's who I call the Great Mother, the Holy Trinity. I was raised that way, and so I've never changed. But it's just beautiful connection that it gives this telepathic connection, but also a feeling that is just joyous and wonderful, and it makes people cry, and it does all kinds of things, and it's just.
And so you were in no doubt that evening prior to the UAP hearing that what was manifesting that night was indeed connected to the prayer that you'd invited them to appear. You do believe that there is a cause and an effect, that basically that wasn't some kind of coincidence. As Sarah says, it was a synchronicity. you're adamant that there was a response to your prayer.
1,000%. There are thousands of people that has witnessed it with me. And sometimes it comes, like Anna says, really close. I mean, feet away. And it's just obvious to those who are around it, that witness it, that see it.
And this was interfaith prayer as well. So there were a number of different Protestant denominations present. There were Catholics. There was Jewish, were faith. So it's been interfaith as well.
That's actually where I'm coming to with you, Sarah, next, which is, do you think it's necessary for there to be prayer or a religious prism through which we see this? Because I sense from you and I have spoken in the past about intuition, the psychical abilities that you've demonstrated in the past. What do you feel, and what did you feel that night when there was this connection happening with the phenomenon?
Yeah, thank you. I felt so much joy from them. So I didn't try to connect with my heart space with it for a little bit. I actually even asked Chris if that was okay. Like, I felt like I was intruding in his energy. So I did ask him if it was all right. And of course he was like, yeah. But I immediately felt from them this playful, joyful feeling. Like they were having just as good of a time as we did. We were so happy and elated. It was pretty amazing, but like the synchronicity part, they knew we were going to be there. They knew to be ready and to say something to us. So I don't believe that religion needs to be a part of it, because when it comes down to it, what is religion? Religion is love. It preaches love, it shares love, it spreads love. And that's the intent. All of us there were about love and for the joyful part, and also the friendship. Like, a lot of us are really good friends. So what better time to show up and make it a historic night of it as it was. So, no, I don't think that religion needs to be there. But it is good to have the intent. So saying a prayer or having some sort of space that you talk and you communicate with them, letting them know that you're coming from a place of love, which is prayer.
I just
and
wanted
Chris,
to double
check. I kind of wanted to keep these things very separate, but then as a scientist, I've seen that it has corresponded every time with prayer previously. So I think that's been very interesting from a pattern recognition standpoint.
And just to set the scene for what you're about to talk about, Anna, as I understand it, you've been to Chris's home on multiple occasions and witnessed the phenomenon with Chris. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, yeah. So I guess just kind of briefly, a group of us went down there, and I think he had mentioned this previously on your show. So that included some interagency colleagues, and I would say we really went down from a more techno-interested standpoint. So kind of wanting to see hard crafts, get more data. And that is certain that persists as an area of interest, is kind of what can be built. But it was interesting to see the precision of that engagement, which, so I do believe that, people can probably experience the phenomenon in a wide range of ways. I've only seen it directly after prayer. So with Chris kind of saying prayer with a group, and then all of a sudden it pops out, or kind of races across the sky. So I didn't want, I think there's what people want this to be, and then there's the body of data and evidence. And so it's not really about my some people have very strong preferences where they don't want it to be one way or the other. I actually did have a preference that I wanted to keep the spiritual and the UAP separate, but that's just not what the data that I've experienced looked like.
Why do we do that? I mean, I do the same thing. I must confess, for years, I've resisted the idea that there is any kind of spiritual connection to UAPs. I could deal with the idea of a technology, little green men from planet Zug, but the idea of there being a psychical, spiritual, psionic, whatever you want to call it, connection with the phenomenon just freaked me out, frankly. And it wasn't, frankly, until I saw it at Esalen with people from the Skywatcher team that I suddenly realized I'm ignoring possibly the most important aspect of the whole phenomenon. Can I ask you this, Anna? You're the scientist, and you're an eminent scientist. You've worked at the highest levels of US government in collaboration with some major agencies. Do you think they know that there is this psionic connection with whatever this phenomenon is?
Yeah, I mean, yes, the people who are paying attention now, right? So because it's data. So some of these people have actually seen it with Chris. People are aware of Skywatcher. People are aware of, I think the Skywatcher team talks about their former government work. So I think for people who, not everybody is interested in this, right? So there's so many.
Why not though? That's the thing that I find perplexing. Why not? I think
most Americans are pretty busy, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
There's
when
lots
I've
of
talked
interesting
to
things that I don't have time for.
When I've talked to senior leaders at some IC agencies, and I tell them like I was what I was doing or what I'm a part of, they're like, "Oh, that's cool. Okay, well, I have my account to worry about." And so by your account, like your area of interest or whatever your workload is, and they're like, "Okay, I don't have time for that." Like, cool.
But I'll just state the obvious here.
Adult learning. What is relevant to us? So for us, our responsibility was the highest performing space technologies, the highest performing energy technology. So to be fair, when I first saw this in 2010, I thought, okay, this is a thing, great. But as an adult learning, what do you do with it? Who cares? I don't want to say who cares, but interesting. But then what do you do with it? So the people who have responsibilities to forward these things, they do, I think, have interest. I think people of faith, in many cases have interest.
But it's more than just a faith thing. Let's state the reality here. The implications are that there is a non-human, highly advanced intelligence using extraordinary technology to engage with humanity, that it probably goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, right through the course of humanity. It responds in most cases, or in some cases, to love. Why isn't that on the front pages of every newspaper and the primary leads on every television channel in the country and the world?
Maybe soon it will be. But I will say, when I have summoned some orbs and craft in before, I never said a prayer. So for me, it's not tied with religion because I don't consider myself religious anymore. I'm spiritual. So I've never said a prayer until the other night with the lovely people here. So it was my first time with them responding to prayer. But like in Egypt, when we saw orbs in Egypt on the boat that night, I didn't say a prayer. I just set an intent and said, "We're here and let us record you if that's possible." And said a few other things, but I never said, the Lord's Prayer or Hail Mary or anything like that.
And when I said people of faith, I think I might have miscommunicated. So we work with a wide range of people who have a range of faith, or they're not spiritual and they're not religious, and they're very interested in this. What I meant when I said people of faith are interested in this, while the U.S. government has done some work towards disclosure, many of the major faiths have also written about this phenomena and some of the advanced physics or phenomena, for instance, gravitational modification, or anti-gravity. That's something that the church has written quite a bit about and they've validated. So there has actually been disclosure from a variety of faith institutions that take this very seriously. So I didn't mean to say that, quite a breadth of all people are interested in this or not, but
there was a mic drop moment in a podcast that you hosted or co-hosted, Anna, in December last year, 2024. And you co-hosted a discussion on a podcast called the Ecosystemic Futures Podcast. And what was interesting about this was a NASA convergent aeronautics project in collaboration with a company called Shoshin Works. And the title of this was Beyond Conventional Physics, Extended Electrodynamics, Lattice Confinement Fusion, Zero-Point Energy, and Advanced Propulsion. And I was actually working in my garden when I was listening to this podcast on my headphones, and I was so shocked I sat down on the grass and listened to it 3 times because I was profoundly affected by the implications of what was being revealed. One of the guests was an engineer named Richard Bandurik from a company called Field Propulsion Technologies. And in your podcast, he disclosed that he had worked on, quote, off-world metamaterials that he said were determined to be such by isotopic analysis, and that he'd done this under special access programs since the 1980s. And I'm sorry to go into the details.
Special access programs, that is something that people thought, but I think he said that he worked on it with NGOs. And
okay. What I read said that it was special access programs, but that might be somebody taking a bit of
that is the perception that people have.
Right.
Is that how is he? So one of the criticisms was, how can he talk about this if he was in a special access program?
Exactly.
And what he has said subsequently was that was not a special access program, and he is not subject to those constraints. But that is the perception that people have.
Specifically, and I really think it's important because I want to pay tribute to the work you've done in this area, he acknowledged he'd worked in a company doing reverse engineering, that another company or another NGO rather had provided that company with, quote, a highly advanced material for study. He admitted he was commandeered into classified programs, which is probably where the special access program illusion came from. And during those studies, he concluded he was working on non-USA technology, is the way he put it. And he went into a whole series of elaborate explanations, but the thing that blew me away was that he described how when he was trying to analyze these materials, they hid how they function. They turned to dust deliberately, as if they were preset to disintegrate when they start working on them. Small slivers of the metal he worked on tried to cloak themselves with the environment. And just to add to this tantalizing mix, my good friend Hal Puthoff stepped in at the very end and concurred that he seemed to be agreeing with what was being described, some of the things that Richard was describing. Now, that podcast came in December last year, and it kind of disappeared. What was the sequel, Anna? What happened?
So there were a number of conversations. So both Hal and Richard were in a group of people that, I and a few people brought together across the interagency, advanced technologies, energy, communications, space tech. And so that was folks from a number of agencies. This was unclassified, and brought people together and also worked to share as much of that as possible publicly. And so then Diane Finkhausen was amazing, for her leadership. Really, she's the one who stood up that NASA podcast with her business, Shoshin Works. So she's a tremendous leader in this field. And it was just, we probably put out 40 hours of UAP type content, across the NASA podcasts, and then also in the interagency Space Disruptors days, which are also available.
I just saw that podcast as an extraordinarily refreshing antidote to all of the debunking and denialism that comes from so much of government, notably from AARO, the Pentagon's UAP investigation office. I mean, it's irreconcilable, isn't it? You've got here an engineer, a respected engineer, before a group of eminent scientists acknowledging that he has worked on off-world materials.
And a number of people have, so that specific account, I mean, that that's distinctive, right? So I wouldn't be able to weigh in one way or the other on those specific materials, but a number of esteemed scientists and researchers have shared, publicly and also in Congress, that there are reverse engineering programs. And it's kind of, when you just think logically, I mean, I live in Virginia. We have, I've said this before, but there was this one time that there was a deer out in front of my house that, we needed to get a deer retrieval. So if there's craft, it's more interesting than a deer. There will be craft retrieval. And then if you're an engineer or a scientist, of course you reverse engineer things. So that's just obvious. If there's something, you will retrieve it, you will reverse engineer it. So a number of really good people have spoken to that. And it would be nice to be able to celebrate the people in these programs for what they've achieved and what they've built. I mean, many people say that extraordinary things have been built and that the United States does have access to we certainly do have access to exceptional technologies, in terms of which ones, which programs with which origins. This is a leading country in the world in terms of innovation. So to be able to see the parts of that are not weapons-based, to be able to celebrate the accomplishments of these people who have been building this out, presumably over many decades, scientists and, just humanity would benefit from it.
Sarah, you've said the word synchronicity earlier. Clearly, you don't think it's just a coincidence that those objects manifested themselves over the White House and the Congress that special evening before probably one of the most momentous UAP hearings of recent time. Do you think whatever that intelligence is, that non-human intelligence, was trying to send you a message that night?
Oh, absolutely. They're sending a very historic message. The timing of it, they knew we were going to be together. They knew we were going to be there. I think the message was, we are here. And we had the amazing amount of people. Like, it wasn't just one or two people to witness it. It was a handful of us. And to be able to speak on this platform, our truth and what we saw is incredible. So yes, there was a message of, we're here, and it was very loving and it was playful and it responded to us. And we were doing a prayer, our very last prayer, and even saw something that was very colorful that went across the sky. So it was amazing. And yeah, the message is, I would say we are here, but we've already known that they're here, right? We've known for thousands of years that we're here, or they're here. I think it's just a good reiteration of the time's coming soon for something.
It's very easy to get disconsolate, though, Anna, with the pace, because with the Pentagon, it's kind of one step forward, two steps back. They seem to be in a denialism phase at the moment. And there's been optimistic glimpses from Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. There's been hints from the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, and over at the CIA, John Ratcliffe. But nobody seems to have moved yet. Are you aware of any moves in government to consider any kind of possible disclosure to the public about a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet?
One of the things that's been interesting about seeing the phenomena is it often presents itself in a manner where there's some degree of ambiguity. So it shows you enough so that you should be able to see there's something interesting and unusual going on here. But if it's too disruptive, there's that ability to kind of focus on what you're doing and not engage with it. So, I guess it's one of these things that when we look at changes in society, it isn't always that everybody has to get engaged right at the beginning. So I think one of the things that's been important for many of us, because we've served in government, is we do want to make this information available to everybody. I mean, as a mother, it's important to me that my children know what's going on. It's important to me that other people's children have just as much access to that knowledge and that ability to engage with this or not. But most big changes in society, until it's already happened completely, society is not engaged. So it's totally fine. So there's way more people engaged in UAP technology than, say, quantum, right? There's way more information on UAP technology than quantum. There's so much. So this quest for more disclosure, and it's nice when amazing things come from the government, but usually the private sector isn't actually looking to the government to lead. So it's kind of, I feel like we've gotten more than I need out of the government. And it's certainly, if they want to transfer some exceptional technologies, would be so grateful for that. Would love to see, the dissemination of what we have that's shareable. But, we don't really need to, we've heard so much. I mean, the president going like this on Rogan, I mean, that's enough for me. I don't need him to, and I would be grateful for anything President Trump additionally wants to share, but I think he's actually done his part, to a certain extent.
So, Chris Bledsoe, are you back on audio, my friend? Can you hear me? Chris, can you hear me? No, you can't hear me. Look, I think I might just bring it to a wrap because unfortunately Chris can't hear me anymore and neither can he speak. I think, interestingly enough, if Chris was able to talk to us right now, unfortunately his mic has died for some reason. If Chris was able to talk to us now, I'm sure he would want me to echo what he said previously to us on Reality Check, which is that he does think that there is some kind of an event going to happen, probably in 2027, where the public are left in absolutely no doubt about the existence of a non-human intelligence. But the message I take from you, Anna, and indeed from you, Sarah, and you, Chris, is that what is probably going to make the public more aware of the phenomenon isn't government. It's not going to be a leadership role from government reading from a lectern in the White House. It's going to be experiences like the ones you all enjoyed over the White House and the Congress on the evening prior to the UAP hearing. So thank you to all of you, Anna Brady-Esteves, Sarah Gam and Chris Bledsoe. Thank you for joining Reality Check and look forward to talking to you again in the future. Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. Now, this week we have a very interesting guest with some very interesting new information about what's really been going on behind the scenes in Congress on the issue of UAPs. I have two words to say to you viewers: Immaculate Constellation. So Michael Schellenberger is a professor, author and journalist who's been very outspoken on issues such as free speech, censorship, homelessness and the environment. Most recently, he's been warning of the dangers of the encroaching threat of censorship by governments, media companies and NGOs. But it was Michael's sources on the subject of UAPs, UFOs, that first caught our attention in September last year, when he published a story revealing 30 whistleblowers working for the federal government or government contractors had come forward to give evidence or protected disclosures to the Office of the Intelligence Community Inspector General or the DoD's Inspector General, the Defence Inspector General, or to Congress. And in that article, he disclosed how testimony included both first and second-hand accounts of crash retrievals of UAP craft, reverse engineering programs by the US, the Russians and the Chinese government, and the testing of materials obtained from retrieved craft, active and ongoing government disinformation operations, kinetic military action with UAPs, contact and collaboration with non-human intelligences, and the successful reverse engineering of a triangle-shaped craft with unconventional propulsion. Now, it was Michael who had interviews with some of those anonymous whistleblowers back in September 23, and his story was full of truth bombs. How Stephanie O'Sullivan, for example, a former Associate Deputy Director of the CIA and Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is aware of a UAP crash retrieval program and reverse engineering program. And Michael's sources said she'd denied its existence to Senator Marco Rubio in a private meeting. Well, he's back. Michael, welcome to Reality Check, and I'm honoured to have you on, sir. Let's talk about this great article you've got this week, which is Pentagon is illegally hiding secret UFO programs from Congress, sources allege. Tell me more, sir.
Hey, great to be with you, Ross. Yeah, this is an incredible story. So, a new whistleblower has come forward with a written report that this person has shared with some members of Congress and with me. And the report is quite extraordinary. It says that there is an unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation, which is the parent program, is the language used for exactly what you said: UAP, crash retrieval, reverse engineering, and apparently a very large database of high quality photographs, videos, infrared videos, apparently much more sophisticated documentation of many more UAP encounters than have been released. And so without the article is really about the allegation that this program exists and that it has been withheld from Congress illegally. I think it's important for viewers to understand that the first article of the United States Constitution requires congressional oversight of all of the activities of the executive branch of the United States government. So whether or not you think there are extraterrestrials or non-human intelligence or anything, even if you think that all of this is just some sort of advanced craft, the allegation here by a new whistleblower verified by other sources in a position to know is that the Pentagon the Defense Department has withheld, kept secret this information from Congress, which is a violation of the Constitution and illegal. So I think that what we're looking at here is really a story about the abuse of power, including in potential disinformation from the Pentagon, just as much as it is this other question of what exactly are people seeing in UAPs.
Now, Michael, this is clearly all rubbish because the Pentagon has assured us as recently as May this year that there is no evidence that any non-human, alien or extraterrestrial intelligence has visited Earth. And that's a formal finding by the ARROW office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is the Pentagon's UFO investigation office. It assessed that the, quote, inaccurate claim that the US government is reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology and is hiding it from Congress is, in large part, the result of circular reporting from a group of individuals who believe this to be the case, despite the lack of any evidence. So where's your evidence?
Yeah, and I think it's important for listeners to know that the all anomaly the all-domain anomaly resolution.
It's a stupid name. Let's just be honest about it, Michael. It's a stupid bloody name.
This was created by Congress, particularly Senators Gillibrand and Senator Rubio, to get to the bottom of the phenomenon and find out what the Defense Department knows. They put out that report, which you quoted from. That is a very thin report. I mean, anybody who is familiar with the case studies on UAP sightings over the last, particularly since World War II, but over time, knows that that is a very thin report. It's a dismissive report. It doesn't seriously deal with many cases. I think that there is the potential for a significant amount of circular reporting. As a journalist, you're always worried about that. This new whistleblower is not part of that circular reporting. I am confident of that. They also, this person did not know the other individuals who verified the name of this program. So I do believe this, and I have checked the credentials of this whistleblower. They are who they say they are. And so it is not part of it does not fit the theory of social contagion. I think the other thing, sorry, go ahead.
No, so I just wanted to double check. Let's talk first about what you can tell me about the credentials of your whistleblower without compromising any of your sources. So clearly you have somebody in Congress who has briefed you on the contents of this whistleblower report, and they've told you who this whistleblower is, Have you been able to speak to that whistleblower yourself?
Yes, I am in direct contact with the whistleblower. I have verified, I've interviewed the person several times. I have verified their credentials and who they are, either in government or as a government contractor. I'm not going to say which, just to keep the universe of potential positions large, as I'm also not revealing their gender or anything else about them to protect them. I think you know, and your viewers may know, witnesses and whistleblowers on this topic, like other topics, but on this topic, they're very scared and their fear is very palpable. I don't think that they're faking it or that they're lying about their fear. I'm also comfortable saying that this person discovered this material accidentally. This was not something that they had expected to encounter. They encountered a large body of information that they describe as a database of this information that's available to others in the intelligence community, in the defense community. So there are, we've heard about that these databases must exist, but the allegation here is that there is a significant body of evidence that has not been made available to Congress in violation of the Constitution, a significant body of evidence that was not included in that Arrow report to the public and to Congress. And so that's a serious allegation in and of itself. So I think before we get to what is the phenomenon, and that's a very important conversation, this is in some ways, this is a process story. It's an abuse of power story, and it's pointing to the inadequacy of whistleblower protections at large in the U.S. government. That's also something verified to me by people in Congress, either as members or as staffers, who say that they understand why whistleblowers don't feel comfortable because they don't have the protections they need in order to come forward. So I think the burden is on Congress to protect these brave individuals who are understandably scared to go public because they have had their security clearances, their professions, and in some cases, according to some people, their lives threatened.
Now, Michael, when I did the introduction to you earlier, I very specifically used a section of your first article from September 2023, where you named Stephanie O'Sullivan, a former Associate Deputy Director of the CIA and Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And you stated that she was aware of a UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, but that she had denied its existence to Senator Marco Rubio. Now,
which is illegal.
I want to focus on that for a moment because of something I know that I'm not going to discuss in detail here. You've had no reason, have you, to doubt the accuracy of that assertion at all?
None.
The allegation on its face is that an officer of the US government has lied criminally to a senator of the United States.
Yes. A very serious accusation.
You know, the thing I find incredible is you made that allegation back in September last year, like a year ago, and absolutely nothing has happened as a result of it. It's I guess what I find depressing is the lack of interest from Congress, at least publicly. You know, we get the odd quotes from Ask a Poll, Matt Laszlo, as he doorstops politicians, and they say, you know, we've got UFO hearings coming, and, you know, obviously we're keen to get to the bottom of this. But where is the vigor? Where is the understanding of the degree of criminality that you talked about in your original article and you're now talking about in this new article? Because what we are talking about here is a constitutional travesty. It's a breach of, as you say, Article 1 of the United States Constitution.
That's right, Ross. And, I should say for viewers who don't know, my bread and butter has been on covering abuses of power. We've covered abuses of power, including the weaponization and politicization of the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, on free speech issues, but also on retaliations against whistleblowers. This is absolutely a nonpartisan issue. It doesn't matter your politics. You do not want the agents, the investigative, security, police functions of your government being weaponized for private interests or political interests. That's a very, very dangerous moment. That's how you get totalitarianism. So for me, this is fun. This is first and foremost a story about abuses of power. You might think that what people are seeing, these UAPs, are just new military craft and it should be kept secret from the American people. That's fine if you think that. But they still are required by the Constitution to inform members of Congress about those programs. I note in my article that, yes, for super secret programs, you don't notify every member of Congress, but there is something called the Gang of Eight, which are the committee chairman and the ranking minority leader on the House and Senate Defense and Intelligence committees. They are absolutely a requirement to tell them both about unacknowledged special access programs, of which Immaculate Constellation is allegedly one, as well as to notify them of CIA covert operations and other intelligence community operations, including potentially the retrieval or reverse engineering of exotic craft, to use the jargon in congressional legislation. But look, the bottom line here is that Congress needs to show some backbone. The Inspector General of the intelligence community said that whistleblower David Grush's testimony was both urgent and credible in July of 2022. Well, it's over over 2 years ago. Grush has testified in front of Congress. What's happening? I think that ultimately it's up to journalists like you and me and these brave whistleblowers to and the public to demand that Congress act and do its job and demand transparency and accountability by an intelligence community that on various issues, not just UAPs, is out of control, as outside of congressional supervision.
So your understanding from your source is that Immaculate Constellation is the code name for this unacknowledged special access program, the USAP. Now, let's get into the nerdy talk about what security classifications mean. There's special access programs, which are secrets that are protected, top secret, SCI clearance secrets. Then you've got unacknowledged special access programs. And then you have another category of waived unacknowledged special access programs, WUSAPs. And in the case of WUSAPs, there is, I understand, a very clear exemption for good reasons, for national security reasons, to protect highly classified programs. These WUSAPs are only briefed, I think, orally to members of the Gang of Eight. But the unacknowledged special access programs, USAPs, which is what you say Immaculate Constellation is, there is no reason at all why that could not be disclosed inside a SCIF to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, the Armed Services Committee, all of those oversight committees that are part of the constitutional requirements for accountability and transparency. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. There was no mention by the new whistleblower or the people that confirmed the existence of Immaculate Constellation that it was a WUSAP. It was simply an unacknowledged special access program. And so it should have been absolutely briefed to the Gang of Eight. I will say that one of the individuals who confirmed the existence of the special access program told me that simply publishing the name the name Immaculate Constellation would trigger surveillance of me, that it is located, is kept under very tight secrecy in the office of the Secretary of Defense. Obviously, that is a little nerve-wracking. I will say I gave the Pentagon, I emailed the Pentagon with a very detailed description of my article last Friday. They asked, in the morning, they asked for more time. I gave them until Monday. Monday, they said they needed until the end of the day Monday. I had not heard from them by the end of the day Monday. So they had almost 5 days to get back to me. And you and I are recording this on Monday evening. So if there is an update to this, hopefully you'll mention that to the viewers. But I have not heard from the Pentagon, which you can interpret however you like. But I think the bottom line is still the same here. If you believe in democracy, which is ruled by the people rather than ruled by secret police, intelligence, and security forces, this is information that absolutely needs to be briefed by the DoD and or the IC to that Gang of Eight or to a broader committee of Congress.
Now, Michael, I can tell you there's a lot in your article that doesn't come as a surprise to me. I just haven't been able to corroborate with my sources what you've been able to find out about certain code names and what you know about the contents of that program. But what I can tell you is the reference made by your source to the fact that there is a database that's being kept separate, which was discovered. I am told that what the Admiral Tom Wilson memo written by Dr. Eric Davis says is correct, that inside the Office of the Undersecretary for Defence Intelligence, there was, and I'm told still is, a completely separate database that you would understand and your source would understand goes by the name Immaculate Constellation. And it's interesting to hear from you so many years later that what Admiral Thomas Wilson stumbled across, and I have to add consistently now denies, is now being proven to be the case, that there was a completely separate database that was locked off from the rest of the Defence Department computer system, which would explain, by the way, why Edward Snowden, when he did his sleuthing, couldn't find anything about it. There is a completely separate database which is kept completely airlocked from the rest of the Defence Department that contains all of this information relating to the UAP program. So let's go through this. I'm really interested to know more. Your understanding is that Immaculate Constellation consists of the capability to detect, quarantine, and transfer UAP and alien reproduction vehicle collection incidents before they are observed and circulated within the military intelligence enterprise, thus serving as a means of enforcing internal information security. Now, I presume UAP is a reference to a non-human craft, correct? If you're one of the millions of dog owners, you're likely aware that maintaining a healthy dog can be complicated. Joint discomfort, bad odour, lack of energy, smelly breath are just a handful of the troubles a dog can experience. But what exactly separates a healthy dog from an unhealthy dog? According to Dr. Marty Goldstein, one of America's most renowned holistic veterinarians, there is one potentially dangerous substance that you should stop feeding your dog immediately. If your dog has been feeling tired or not having the energy it used to, this one compound could be the reason. Many dog food manufacturers have this substance in their dog foods, and it's one that most dogs consume on a daily basis. This is something that's not being reported by most mainstream media and big dog food manufacturers. After years of research, Dr. Marty has decided to release an informative video to the public, free and uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you should stop feeding your dog, which you can find out right now by going to healthydog1.com/Ross or by clicking the link in the description box below. That's healthydog1.com/Ross. That's all one word, healthydog1.com/Ross. Just by making this one simple change, he was able to support his dog's overall health. You can also do the same thing right in your own home, and it takes just a few minutes a day. So go find that video now at healthydog1.com/Ross or click on the link below. to find out right now. You won't believe how simple this is. Now, I presume UAP is a reference to a non-human craft, correct?
Well, I don't know, honestly, and I mean, I laugh a little bit because you always have a lot of information when you're writing an article and you're trying to figure out what to keep in and keep out, and I did keep that information in there because that was the information that the whistleblower has in their report. Alien reproduction vehicle. I don't think I'm not sure I'd used that term before. It's obviously going to raise a lot of eyebrows, and I should stress that I'm not saying I know that they exist or that I'm endorsing any other part of the things that have been said about that. But indeed, that is what this person has put in their report to members of Congress, notifying them about this database, which also, Ross, I wanted to mention because earlier I mentioned that there's a significant amount of visual data. However, the whistleblower in their report says that they also includes human intelligence. And so you're also looking at reports. There's one spectacular incident described in the report. I mean, there's several in the report. One of them is of an F-22 being surrounded by UAPs shaped like orbs and effectively escorted. Escorted makes it sound like nice, but sort of forcibly moved out of its mission area by these UAPs. So a real direct engagement by UAPs. I don't know, and the whistleblower is not saying what those UAPs are. The person's not saying that they're, non-human or extraterrestrial. Obviously, if they're Chinese or Russian or Iranian or something, that's a technology that is not out there and should be very alarming for straight defense reasons. But yeah, then the introduction of this term alien reproduction vehicle is effectively a reference to craft that are using not using typical propulsion and using something that is more akin to what people call anti-gravity.
So that's the interesting thing. There's two nomenclatures that we need to define in what your whistleblower's told you goes into his report. There's UAP, and that's grey. We just don't know at this moment. But alien reproduction vehicle, I can tell you, is very, very clearly a reference to a vehicle that has been constructed from non-human technology that is being operated presumably by either private aerospace or the United States government.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the language is very important because if you read what Arrow wrote, there is potentially room within that report for them to be able to, they say we haven't found any evidence of vehicles from extraterrestrials or from other planets. But they do seem to leave open the door potentially to this different category of craft. And so that is one potential is that, for me, as a fairly newcomer to this issue, I was not familiar at all with this discourse, but basically there is this idea, and it is in the whistleblower report, that the United States government is in possession of craft that it has itself made based on UAPs that it has captured, and apparently using anti-gravity as the means for propulsion.
Now, you mentioned, Michael, that there's a significant volume of intelligence reports in this database that the whistleblower describes, documenting first-hand encounter with UAPs or UFOs by defense personnel, and that this exists within databases accessible to the intelligence community. There's high-quality imagery, IMINT, and measurement and signature intelligence, MASINT, of UAPs. And the sources of this intelligence are a blend of directed and incidental collection capabilities positioned in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, as well as military and civilian aviation altitudes and maritime environments. I've got to ask, Michael, did your source show you any of this imagery?
No, I did not see any of them. I would have loved to, but I think it's fair to say this person felt that would be just a severe risk. I mean, that's the kind of thing that this person felt they could end up in prison, essentially, if they had attempted to capture any of that imagery. I did also, though, want to say, Ross, because I didn't mention it earlier and we haven't talked about it, it's important to point out that you just sort of said it. These are images and other data collected by sensors that are operated by the U.S. military and by the intelligence community and potentially others. But this is not just photos and videos shot by civilians or even commercial airline pilots with their cell phones or even sophisticated cameras. This is shot by U.S. government. Much of this material is captured by U.S. government personnel. And so the language that they use in the report is that there's a clear chain of custody on this evidence. And so, in other words, for people that pay attention to the popular discussion of UAPs, there's a lot of videos out there, and often we don't know who shot them or where they came from, or it's not a clear chain of custody. That's the gold standard as any investigators. You want to know exactly who shot it, who's had custody of it. That's the whole chain of custody, so that if anybody wants to do further investigations, you can go interview the crew. So, of course, one of the most famous examples is the famous Tic Tac sighting, where you have 4 Navy pilots who are all incredibly credible Navy pilots who tell the exact same story about what happened when they encountered this UAP. And so that's the level of quality that you're talking about, and a lot of it, not a little bit of it. And we've heard in the past, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Christopher Mellon has said that there is a significant body of that information. We've also heard Lou Elizondo and David Grush say that. But this is the first time, to my knowledge, that anybody has actually named this unacknowledged special access program and described in some detail both the kinds of evidence gathered as well as the shapes of the UAPs. And I should just say that this report, I hope at some point it does become public. It's a fascinating, there's much more in it than I could summarize in the article, but there's just a fascinating description of different UAPs that we've all heard about, orbs and Tic Tac and discs and triangles and boomerangs and all the different, you think about the Phoenix Lights. And so you sort of, if you have some familiarity with the big UAP cases, it's very striking to see that there is a database of UAPs captured apparently by the Defense Department and the intelligence community in a database that Congress, at a minimum, the Gang of Eight should have access to.
So let's go through the detail that you were given. I'm intrigued to hear that you heard a lot more detail than you were able to put into your article. But as I understand it, the report that has been given to Congress by the whistleblower describes in detail various UAPs and how from 1991 to 2022, the most common UAP shapes reported in this data set were spheres, orbs, discs, saucers, ovals, tic-tacs, triangles, boomerang arrowheads, and irregular organic shapes. Mm-hmm. Your source obviously had an opportunity to look at that database. Can you give me some information on the size of the whistleblower report? How many pages is it? How much detail is being provided to Congress?
Yeah, the report. So I have the report. It's, I think it's 25 pages. It's very well written. This is a professional, somebody whose job it is to interpret information and evidence, somebody who obviously feels moral duty to the Constitution. Similarly to David Grush, this is a person who obviously loves their country and is patriotic, and does not feel that this information, if it got out, would undermine national security. I hope very much that the report, that some version of it can be made public, because this is taxpayers paid for this research, as you mentioned, over many decades. I am not sure that people, maybe people really know what it is. Maybe they don't, but either way, there's no, I don't see any reason. I didn't see anything in it. And I'm not a journalist and with all due respect to Julian Assange, I would not just release information willy-nilly. I also care about the security of the United States, as does this person. That's why I gave the Defense Department almost 5 days to get back to me. But it has an incredible amount of information, and I think there's just been a lot of gaslighting on this issue. And one of the things I describe in here, and your viewers probably know this history better than I do, but basically the CIA created something called the Robertson Panel in 1953, which came out and said that all of these reports should be not only aggressively debunked, reports of UAPs, but ridiculed. And ridicule is a very severe form of disinformation because it really attacks the character of a person. It's a way of calling people mentally ill. I think it's very cruel, and so I think that this report, validates that people were not crazy that reported these things. That these things are real physical manifestations, objects, phenomena. That these incidents are real. That they've been viewed by many enlisted soldiers. That a campaign of repression and threats and fear has been waged against people. And then the gaslighting, which is also, it's a tactic of abusers, continued from the Robertson Panel in 1953, and then of course your viewers probably also know there's something called the Condon Committee in 1960. I think it ran from 66 to 68, which also dismissed all of this. And so I'm also somebody that is very concerned about government disinformation. And there are multiple cases of acknowledged and proven disinformation, including by the Air Force Office of Special Intelligence. And so we don't want the government, you don't want the government hiding things that are in the public's interest to know, and you also don't want the government spreading disinformation and ruining people's lives, because these are real people's lives we're talking about here, and there's so far no justification has been given for this level of secrecy, censorship, and disinformation.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty, some of the detail that you do reveal in your report. And there is, as you've already acknowledged a little bit earlier, an absolutely incredible incident involving an F-22 Raptor, which is the top frontline fighter jet in the United States military arsenal. And it describes orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of a patrol area. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. Now, the thing about that, Michael, is I often cop it from some viewers who are very much of the rosy view about non-human intelligence, that they're all benevolent and kind. What you seem to be describing here is something where, at the very least, a UAP or a group of UAPs are essentially trying to behave like an adversary. They're boxing in a fighter jet. What's going on? What does the whistleblower think about that finding? And what conclusion did you reach on the basis of the evidence that you read in the report?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, so again, I want to stress, I'm new to this. I have, beginner mind on this issue. I mean, I'm not by any means an expert on it, or a military expert. So with those caveats out of the way, I mean, the first most obvious thing you're struck by with that particular case is that this technology or form of life or whatever it is, adversary, is demonstrating dominance. I mean, just the most simple basic thing is that there's somebody if there's an interaction, it can be cooperative or among equals, or it can be hierarchical, and there's dominance by a greater power. And in this case, that those craft or phenomena or whatever are demonstrating dominance. And that does have to do with that TikTok incident that the Navy pilots describe. I mean, I think you could argue that it wasn't not necessarily, we don't know if it's, say, hostile. In other words, nobody was shot down and there's no evidence that anybody was harmed. But dominance is about power and about a demonstration of capabilities. And so clearly, in that case, and there are other cases in that report, which again I hope is made public. These are phenomena showing dominance. It's not showing, benevolent space brotherhood. It's demonstrating dominance at a very basic physical level. You don't need to do a lot of interpretation to see that that's what's going on.
So in the report, you actually describe how one UAP maneuvered very close to the jet, to the starboard of the cockpit, and it established a rigid spatial relationship with the F-22, so that when the jet was rolling and diving and trying to get away from this object, it stayed fixed. That's what I find fascinating. Whatever the technology is behind these objects, what they were able to do was track exactly what the F-22 was doing. It couldn't shake it.
Amazing. I mean, I think, anybody that knows some of the history of this, it sounds a lot like Foo Fighters, from World War II, these similar orbs. I mean, orbs are very a common UAP, but not, because I think an important piece of context is that, and I describe in my article, I give a lot of space and explain the conventional explanations of this. How might a UAP debunker, how would they describe this? One of the ideas is that this is sort of a natural phenomenon. This is maybe a new plasma or a kind of ball lightning. Doesn't seem to be that. It would be an extraordinary, because it's moving clearly with the jet. And so
does it acknowledge that the jet, I mean, a lot of these pilots in the F-22 have got phased array radar systems, which are incredibly top-of-the-line radar. Is there any acknowledgement, to your knowledge, in the report as to whether any of these objects were picked up on radar?
That's a good question. On that specific case, I'm not sure, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because yes, there is a significant discussion of tracking these objects on radar. And so radar is a big part of the evidence base. The report also mentions that they are documenting both the UAPs and the effects of UAPs through sensors tracking their physical effects on the Earth environment that are maybe not visible, or they say are not visible. So what's being emphasized? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What does that mean? What do you mean their physical effects on the Earth environment?
I can't remember if there was anything more specific about it, but it was, I think the language was atmospheric effects of these UAP, and I don't remember any more detail than that.
One of the things you do mention, there's another incident that you talk about where an orange orb was watched by the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier. A sphere descended from high altitude to about 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of this aircraft carrier. It emitted a soft orange-red light, which didn't illuminate the ocean or the flight deck, despite the appearance of intense luminosity. The surface of the UAP was observed to be dynamic, roiling like the surface of the sun. And it was this bit here in your article that intrigued me. It appears to be acknowledging biological effects on humans, the consciousness, psychical engagement by these objects with human observers. It said afterwards, observing personnel felt as if they snapped out of a trance and a sense of personal unease. That's a really interesting biological effect of this phenomena, isn't it?
Yeah, and very impressive that it's acknowledged by the military. I mean, I think, as you know, this phenomenon has a physical nuts and bolts hardware part of it, which is the level at which I think which many people are uncomfortable even talking about, but certainly it's probably less uncomfortable than some of the psychological, or you might even say spiritual, effects that people describe relating to the phenomenon. So I was impressed to see that had been properly documented by whoever it was in the U.S. military that had done the interviews with the crew to describe these hypnotic effects, because it's clearly been part of the history of the research of UAPs and their effects on people, is that people describe having lingering effects, both bad and good. Certainly a sense of awe, which may just be awe at some more powerful technology than we have, but also something that's sort of uncanny and doesn't lend itself as easily to language, that these soldiers on a aircraft carrier were apparently describing to some investigator.
So, Michael, the big question is there any basis that your whistleblower understands this could possibly be legal? I mean, one of the most commonly speculated explanations is that perhaps as early as back in the days of Harry Truman and Eisenhower, there was some kind of presidential executive order that was made that enshrined this legacy program in secrecy and somehow removed it from the need to put it under congressional oversight. To your understanding, as somebody who understands a lot of the constitutional law of America, I can't think of any basis upon which the American Constitution could be superseded by presidential order. Can you?
No, because it's right there in black and white in our Constitution, and it's Article 1. It's like the First Amendment. It's like they put it first for a reason. It's at the heart of our system of checks and balances. It's as I get older, I really appreciate the brilliance and the genius of the U.S. Constitution and this idea of overlapping powers and checks and balances. And so I think that this is more evidence that the system is out of balance, that the executive branch, that elements within the executive branch, elements within the defense and intelligence communities are outside of democratic civilian control. And I, for one, don't want to live in a country that is not under civilian democratic control. We don't want to live as slaves or as serfs. That's the whole purpose of the United States of America. So I can't imagine any court, much less the U.S. Supreme Court, upholding the right of the Defense Department or the intelligence community to withhold this information at a minimum from the Gang of Eight. And I'm not entirely comfortable with just 8 members of Congress. That's not language from the Constitution. That's a more recent interpretation. But I think more broadly on this issue, and I say this to my friends who are very, very skeptical, like really don't believe any of this, and who think it's either some combination of hallucinations, disinformation, and social contagion. I always say, great, if you think that, then you should be the biggest advocate for disclosure and transparency and accountability. Because if this is some new, if it's if the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians or some foreign adversary, or if it's the U.S. government, Article 1 of the Constitution still applies, and the Supreme Court would require its enforcement if it ever came to them.
Now, Michael, you've had the chance to talk directly with this whistleblower. And I have to say, for me, a lot of the time when I've met people from the legacy UAP program, the decisive moment where I became to believe that this is real is when I actually got the chance to meet these people, look them in the eye, and make the judgment that, yeah, they were telling the truth. I couldn't trip them up. You've had that opportunity with your own whistleblower, this person who's written this whistleblower report to Congress. What's your gut feeling about the truth of the allegations that there is non-human technology being held by the US government and or private aerospace without congressional oversight or transparency?
Yeah, so first of all, I should say, I've dealt with a lot of whistleblowers over the last couple of years. We had 2 incredible sources tell us who the first people to get COVID were at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And those people were scared, but they felt the public needed to know. And by the way, Wall Street Journal confirmed our reporting 1 week later. These whistleblowers are terrified. They're really, really scared. They've they have reason to be scared. I think they are psychologically healthy individuals. I don't think they have. There's nothing I could. I've in my past work, I've dealt with mental illness. I interview homeless people on the street who are psychotic, including having UFO and alien psychoses. I recognize that could be psychosis. These people are not in psychotic states. These people are mentally healthy. They've passed all sorts of tests to be where they are. I have another whistleblower. I can't say a single thing about this person other than they're totally terrified. And I've been encouraging them to go to Congress, to go public, that they'll be safer that way. But it's very hard to fake that kind of fear. Most people are not very good actors. I mean, most actors are not very good actors. It's very hard to fake that level of fear, especially when you're dealing with people, you know who they are and where they sit in various agencies or contractors, and they're in a position to know. And this person, I will say, I have met them in person. The whole way in which we met showed deep alarm and concern about their safety, and they are still very nervous about this and feel that their obligation to the public interest trumps their fear, because of course courage is not acting without fear. Courage is acting despite having a lot of fear. And so I think these people deserve a lot of credit. They're really American heroes as far as I'm concerned.
So I want to pin you down, Michael. Where do you stand? You've got a gut instinct. What's your gut telling you about the veracity of the person you've been speaking to?
I'm sure I'm very confident they're telling the truth. I mean, you never want to be 100%, but I'd say 95% that they're telling the truth. Same for the existence of this database and this program. It's a very specific set of details. I don't think that it doesn't come from the lore. It's new. I did verify this. Always, you can't do anything with. You should never do anything with a single source, in my view. I do have other sources that confirmed that name, and like I said, the confirmation came with a warning that it could result in my surveillance. So, I think it's a strong story. I will also point out, Ross. I wrote I think 3 pieces last year on UAPs out of probably 300 articles. A lot of people wanted me to keep doing UAP stories. And what I said was, I'll do a story when I have something really significant that I'm willing to, put my name on and stand by. And so this is the first story in over a year, and stand by the story. And I stand by the sources. I believe that they're telling the truth.
Why do you believe, what does your source tell you? What are your sources telling you about why the cover-up? I mean, I lie in bed at night and think, why don't the US government just come out? Why doesn't Joe Biden just walk to a lectern in the White House and say, ladies and gentlemen, people of America, people of the world, we are not alone? Why the lie?
Well, yeah, not only that, but it's also like, why the persistence of the lie over such a long period of time? I mean, if I believe my sources, and I suspect your sources have told you the same thing, there was every expectation that if Hillary Clinton had been elected, because she was very close to John Podesta, who's somebody that I've known for a long time. We don't always agree on many issues. We don't agree. That's why I like this issue. Is one of the pleasant things about it is that it's very bipartisan and non-ideological. But there was some sense in which the Clintons were going to do something. There's also, I mean, you've seen Donald Trump has said. I mean, I think for anybody who thinks, I mean, the most basic allegation here, the most fundamental allegation is that the U.S. government knows more than they're telling the public or Congress. President Trump has just confirmed that multiple times in recent podcasts in recent days, saying that he knows things that are not public. So President Trump was briefed. Why didn't he make it public? Why have Biden and Harris not made it public? John Podesta was in the White House for a different issue, but certainly for no lack of influence. You know, everybody has the same set of reasons. There's some sense in which there's just fear of public panic. And I think there's some reason to worry about that. I also think it can be overstated. I think that there's some genuine concern that these technologies are an advantage to the United States against our earthly adversaries. I find that plausible. And then I think the other more troubling conclusion would be that there's some bad things that have been going on as part of this. I'll use the word cover up, because that's what it is. There's some troubling behaviors that have gone along with the cover up. I mean, David Grush is on the record saying that people have been killed. I don't have evidence of that. That's not my claim. I'm saying that's what he said. I've certainly seen other people say it. I did do a whole story last year on UAP witnesses and whistleblowers reporting threats, including death threats, not just in the United States, but around the world. I find those witnesses credible. I don't think that I don't think that sane people allege that the U.S. government or government officials had threatened them unless it had occurred. So I worry that there has been some bad behaviors that have gone along with a cover-up, and that the various folks that are still in what is sometimes referred to as the legacy program or these unacknowledged special access programs, that they're worried about some consequence for themselves. I mean, look, they didn't release all the JFK files, and Mike Pompeo, Trump's former the CIA director under Trump, said that it's because there were people still alive who were involved. Well, I mean, I don't find that particularly persuasive, and maybe we need some agreement on amnesty. But that also seems very plausible, because we certainly have seen in other cases how bad powerful bureaucrats can behave when they get into those positions.
It's funny, I once flippantly wrote, I think it was in my book, Michael, In Plain Sight, I wrote about how, the lying bastards that are responsible for this cover-up should be tarred and feathered and dragged around Washington behind the back of a Humvee. And some idiot tried to suggest I was advocating violence against the gatekeepers. In fact, what I strongly believe is that there should be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I was privileged to be able to cover the South African post-apartheid regime hearings as a journalist, and I thought it was incredible to watch boss Secret Service killers who'd murdered people in the freedom movement apologising and admitting their crimes to the families of the people who'd been killed. And it was an incredibly therapeutic moment, and it has stopped, I think it stopped South Africa from falling apart into civil war. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, I know the allegations of people being killed are true, because I've been doing my own investigations, which people may soon see the result of. There are very, very grave illegalities and criminal actions and morally reprehensible actions that go to the whole issue of questioning our humanity as a species behind why there's the cover-up. And I just want to come back. There was a great quote from Matthew Pines, our mutual friend, a former very senior intelligence analyst, in one of your original stories from September last year. Matthew said to you, "There may be an acute concern that if this becomes another church committee level scandal, it would pour kerosene over the burning embers of distrust in the political system. And whether it's the worry over technological surprise from strategic competitors like China, or that too many people have already spilled the beans, the political leadership may feel they have to manage things as much as possible behind the scenes as they face an unstable geopolitical dynamic and gird for an exceptionally fraught 2024 campaign." That comment, that quote by Matthew Pines, I thought was very prescient, because he's been proved right. It has been an incredibly rocky campaign. But do you think any of that is an excuse for non-disclosure, non-transparency, non-accountability to the American public and the rest of the world about what America really knows?
No, absolutely not. And I come back to, for me, this is an abuse of power story first and foremost. And I by the way, I 100% agree with you. It's more important to get the truth out and to end this decades-long government disinformation, ridicule, character assassination, cover-up, because it's really causing harm to real people, and it's undermining public trust in the government. I'm not anti-government. Like I object to false accusations against the FBI, which happen by some individuals on social media alleging things that are exaggerations or not true. I think it undermines and waters down when you have serious abuses of power that you need to get to the bottom of. We're overdue for another church committee hearing. I mean, that's the famous 1975 post-Watergate moment where we learned about MK Ultra. We learned about assassinations. We learned about efforts at mind control, things that sound like science fiction. We learned were actually being done by the CIA. I think we're overdue for a period of reform. I mean, America's founders, when they said, you need a revolution every few decades, that's really what they meant. Is they meant that you need a reform, you need a cleaning of the house, a cleaning out of the closets. And so, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it should not be about revenge. It should be about truth and reconciliation, just like the South African model showed. And let's extend it to the JFK files and the UAP files and other abuses of power that we've seen, because ultimately that's a concern for all citizens, not just for people that are concerned about this particular issue.
Well, Michael Schellenberger, where can people read your article, which is, by the way, a fantastic read?
Thank you so much. People can just go to public.news, which is our Substack, but also the same content is available on X, formerly Twitter, at Schellenberger is the handle, no C, just at Schellenberger.
And Michael, can I ask you this? Is your whistleblower, have they given evidence in camera or in any testimony at all apart from their report to Congress? Have they been called to give evidence under oath?
I genuinely don't know the answer to that question, but I can say that they have talked to either members of Congress or their staffs, and there are efforts underway. And I also should say that members of Congress and their staffs really would love to hear from other whistleblowers. And if they're scared, I also want to say I can work with them to protect their confidentiality. I think the reason that whistleblowers talk to us is because we are extremely careful about protecting our sources. And I also know the congressional staffers who are also serious professionals at protecting people. And so you'll be safer if you come forward and have contact with a journalist like myself and trusted congressional staffers than if you're out there on your own. So a message to anybody out there that's thinking about coming forward.
I'm really sorry to keep on going as long as I am, but I'm really fascinated to get as much detail from you as possible. Clearly, this has gone to a committee before the Congress. Are you able to say which committee it's gone to?
I'm not comfortable saying, but anybody that knows how this stuff works will be able to guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence. But moving on from that, one thing I'm really worried about is there's been a lot of evidence. You're quite right, by the way, that last year you said that 30 people had given evidence, and it's actually a bit more than that now. But one of the things that's been worrying me is a lot of this evidence has been given in camera before staffers and legal counsel, because one of the methods that politicians use to essentially immune themselves from being too close to sensitive revelations is to send senior staffers who are legal counsel. So my understanding is a lot of the testimony has been given in camera before legal counsel and senior staffers on these committees, like oversight committees like the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee and the Oversight Committee. Have any politicians, to your knowledge, directly engaged with your whistleblower? And if so, why not?
I genuinely don't know the answer to that question, but I did want to say, because we haven't said this before, is that I don't trust Arrow at all, and I would actually actively recommend whistleblowers not talk to Arrow. I don't think that they're trustworthy. I'm sorry to say. I also don't trust the ICIG or the DODIG anymore. I just don't think that I don't think they're doing their jobs, and we haven't, like, there's what's going on with all these people that have come forward. I think all the action is at the level of Congress and the public, as mediated by journalists and the media. And so if I were a whistleblower and I were scared, that's the two. I would find a journalist. Doesn't have to be me. I'm happy to work with anybody, but a journalist you trust. And I'm also happy to connect people to those congressional staffers. But that's where this has to take place. We have to strengthen protections for whistleblowers. I mean, I appreciate if you're the head of a big bureaucracy, you don't want your disgruntled staff running off to be whistleblowers all the time. On the other hand, if the issue is not a big one, then it's not going to matter for you anyway. But we don't have adequate whistleblower protections. I mean, for me, that's like a whole separate problem and story. We need to strengthen whistleblower protections. That's Congress's job. It needs to do that. It should be one of the highest priorities for anybody who cares about good government, certainly for anybody that cares about getting out the truth and disclosure around UAPs. Because as it is now, I just think many people, quite reasonably, are just too scared to come forward.
Well, Michael, I hope your article plays a significant role in encouraging those whistleblowers to come forward, and congratulations on your piece. Immaculate Constellation is quite a name. I wonder if it's a play on Immaculate Conception. Maybe we'll never know. Michael Schellenberger, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross. Great to be with you.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.